Good morning. This committee of the whole is back in order. When we took a break last evening, we were at Senator Uggan. You had an amendment?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vice Speaker, there was an amendment that was circulated yesterday that would address a concern that I brought to the attention of this body in regards to a government entity not receiving any appropriation from the local general fund. And should they pursue federal grants that require matching, do they have that flexibility to be able to have the chief executive assist with providing that local matching requirement? And there's one excellent example, Mr. Chairman, and that's the Guam Homeland Security. They were recently awarded a grant that required about $10,000 in local matching, and unfortunately that has yet to be effectuated. So, Mr. Chair, I would like to proffer this amendment to add to Section 1 of Chapter 13. The verbiage would read, Imagalahin Guahan is authorized to transfer from any appropriation from Chapter 5 of this Act, not restricted from transfer authority to the Department of Homeland Security. It really should read to the Guam Homeland Security for matching funds for federal grants. Okay, Mr. Chairman?
On the Uggan amendment, any senator wish to be heard on it? Thank you. And before we broke last night, the majority leader brought to our attention that, oh no, I guess there's an amendment by Speaker Wampat. Oh, okay, I guess not. Go ahead, distribute. All right. As we broke last evening, the majority leader brought to our attention an issue of the compiler of law codifying certain provisions of the administrative provisions, and there being some issue with that. The Office of Finance and Budget and the Committee on Appropriations, thinking that those provisions had been codified, did not include it in the budget the budget bill that's before you. We did, however, amend a couple of those sections earlier, but in the interest of transparency, I have included on a list to all of you, and I believe all of you were emailed before or at the close of business last night, a copy of all of the provisions that we thought would be affected if the minority leader's amendment was passed. And I think maybe we should just go through them one by one. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, so just as a matter of procedure, I move to accept for purpose of discussion the proposed amendment that you passed out. And I would move that to help move the process along. And we can go through it section by section.
All right.
As you indicated. Thank
you very much. And I provided it all to you last night so that you would all have an opportunity to review it. Hopefully we can move through them quickly today. If there are any objections, please indicate so. And we'll have legal counsel number it. On the one entitled Retirement Option for Government of Guam Employees. Any senator wish to be heard on that administrative provision? Seeing or hearing no objection, that provision is approved. On advance payment for medical services, any senator wish to be heard? Which ones did we amend?
Not this one, I'll show you.
Mark them so they get to it. On wireless communications restrictions, I don't see Senator Tom here, and I believe he may have concerns about this. Do you know what? No. This was one of the ones that he noted was missing and led to everybody looking to see. Does anyone wish to, Senator Tony Adams? I guess
Thank
the
you,
other
Mr.
Adam.
Chairman, Vice Speaker. Yeah, I'd like to make an amendment to have this section deleted from the restrictions, as we all know that cellular services now are, so much cheaper than they were before, and a lot of agencies or departments that have people out on the road for different functions of their occupations, I don't believe they should be using their personal cell phones. And if a department gets a cell phone for them, that they should be able to do their work using an agency or department provided cellular service.
We didn't budget for it, did we? Wireless.
It's in telephone.
Okay. There's a motion by Senator Tony Ada to delete this section, Senator Sir Nicholas, and then Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With respect to the amendment, the entire section does provide a number of exemptions for various positions that I think are very relevant. What I wanted to ask OFB is if they could provide a number for the total personnel that we currently have working in the government of Guam, just approximately.
No, how many employees? 12,000? Inclusive of the autonomous agencies, about 12,000.
About 12,000. So if we go 12,000 employees, and assuming a cellular phone plan of about maybe, let's go with a conservative $300 a month times. That's with data. Well, let's assume that the agencies are going to justify the data so the employee can check their email, because nobody should be checking their email on their personal phone. Right? I mean, if the argument is that we're going to be authorizing wireless communications, and the likelihood is that they can go all the way up to $300 a month for them to be able to access data, for them to be able to check their email. And the reason why I bring this up is because my wife is a government employee. She uses her personal cell phone. She checks her email on her personal cell phone, work email. She texts, she uses WhatsApp, all these things on her personal cell phone. And while it would be great for the government to pay for it, I want us to get a real idea of what it's going to cost this government if we're going to get cell phones for everybody, with the wireless data plan justifying that, they're going to be doing their business on this. So using a conservative $300 times 12,000 employees, we have $3,600,000 a month on a monthly plan. We multiply that by 12, and we're talking about a $43 million potential liability to the government of Guam if we're going to be throwing the door wide open for all of the employees. Now, I can understand the need for us to have certain employees authorized to use cell phones, even with the data plan, even. But for the potential for us to be able to just throw it wide open, I mean, the likelihood of us creating the justifications necessary and the contracts going out and the expenses ratcheting up dramatically, it's very real. It's a slippery slope for the government. And so that's why this section, when I took the time to read it, I can appreciate the work that went into it, because it does provide for many exemptions. It provides exemptions for law enforcement officials, on-call attorneys, the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center, the judge of the Superior Court of Guam, the Attorney General, the Office of the Public Defender, on-call health professionals at GMH, the Department of Public Health and Social Services and Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness. It provides exemptions for village mayors and vice mayors. It provides exemptions for Guam Fire Department and EMS officials, exemptions for on-call emergency management personnel. There's exemptions for the chief medical examiner. There's a blanket exemption for the Guam Visitors Bureau, the Guam Election Commission. So there are a lot of exemptions, and if we see that there's a need for more exemptions, I'm down for putting them in. But for us to just completely take the section out and to throw the door wide open for us having 12,000 employees and a potential $300 a month data plan that's going to cost $43 million a year, it's a little too much to ask as far as I'm concerned. So I would like to object to the amendment, but I will support wholeheartedly any additions to the exemptions that we can go over item by item, provided that we can justify the need for us to be able to fund that with the people's money. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. An objection has been stated, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I truly understand, of course, the concern of wanting to delete all of this, and sometimes we think that, and this argument was actually brought up at the time, that this may be nominal, but when you start to add it up, then of course it becomes exorbitant. The other issue that was not brought up is that because this does not really, even with the exemptions that we have here, it doesn't really say who, whether it's just the appointing authority, division heads, or what have you, those in supervisory positions, to determine who within their own department will be, using, of course, cell phones. The biggest, I think, expense, other than just the contracts that the government would have, is that when they go off island, and just about everyone in the government, for whatever federal programs that they're are going to lobby for, is that then the opportunity to leave their phones on roaming, of course, can be very expensive. And some of our colleagues here, not knowing at the time, had done just that and came back with, for a trip maybe of only 5 days, a roaming bill of about $800 to $1,000. And I see some heads nodding, because these are on their own personal phones, not realizing it, either. So I can see this amount escalating beyond even what was quoted by our previous colleagues. So I too would definitely object to the deletion of this particular section.
Thank you. Any other senator wish to be heard on this? Senator Tommy Morrison.
Mr. Chair, I just want to seek some clarification, because I'm looking at the language in the item A on page or number 5. Unless the government of Guam will be reimbursed from federal funds or other grants. I know the mover of the amendment is not here, but I'm thinking, with these federal funds. Oh, that's right. Okay.
The other add-on.
Okay, I just wanted to see, because my understanding, when we see federal funds or grants, these are already built into the grant, and how these services or for such use as wireless communications. But if we can get clarification, because I've seen some justification for some of the uses here, but again, we're talking about unless the government of Guam will be reimbursed from federal funds or other grants.
I think what they're trying to say is that general fund revenues will not be used for it. That if you're going to get a reimbursement in the federal grants, that you can get a cellular phone, but if the grant provides for it, but otherwise it's not provided for, except for starting on line 5 of who it does not apply to. The first sentence is the prohibition against any cellular phones unless it's going to be paid for by the federal government. Then starting at line 5 down, it lists who can get cellular phones and when they're on duty, and
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think maybe when we go through this process again next year, again, of course, noted by previous speakers of the reductions of cost throughout competition in the telecommunication industry, maybe throughout the next cycle we can actually talk about this with these specific agencies. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other senator wish to be heard? There has been an objection. You may close.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker, Mr. Chair. You know, here we go again. You know, we put the burden on our people's backs for them to do their work for the government and again pay for it personally. If I can have audio just zoom into the public hearing room.
Let's continue.
It is appropriate because of the fact that those are government employees who use their personal cell phones to conduct government work. And it just goes to show that, once again, here we are putting the burden on the people's back. We need to stop this. And if we're going to be government employees...
There is an exemption on line 9 for law enforcement officials.
If we're going to do this to our government employees, and not just law enforcement officials, I'm talking our government employees as a whole. But there is an objection, and we'll vote on the objection. Thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker, Mr. Chairman.
I just want everybody to understand that the budget as is currently written has a very, very small amount of money in telephones.
And that's very, very true, Mr. Speaker.
So I
Mr.
just,
Vice Speaker,
I
Mr.
just want
Chairman.
to.
And I'm pretty sure, and I know that our government agency heads and our supervisors and our, I know they're very responsible people, and they do what they can to limit expenditures within their agencies and the departments. And sometimes we just need to look at, you know, stop micromanaging our supervisors and directors. But well, there is an objection. We'll go ahead and call for the vote. Thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker.
All those in favor of the amendment? Fails. On the programming reporting requirement for employment placement, and job placement programs at the Guam Community College University.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, did we already pass this section concerning wireless communication restrictions?
No, well,
I know there was an amendment.
there's an amendment proffered. I'm sorry. Go
I
ahead.
would like to, I guess, make a point of inquiry or a general inquiry, maybe even for the retiring speaker, if there's any specific positions he would like to further exempt in this act, because he made the comment about the backs and, you know, relieving burdens. Surely, let's talk about where those burdens are then that we probably would like to relieve. So, an inquiry, I guess, a general inquiry, Mr. Chairman. What other exemptions would we like here?
Well, maybe the previous speaker would like to just go to agency and ask their directors and their supervisors as to who is entitled or needs a wireless communication to stay in touch and do their work while they're working. You'll be able to get that answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Well, it's clear, Mr. Chairman, that there's no specifics, so I'm satisfied with the current section.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And whoever has this committee in the next legislature can send out a memo to all the departments asking who they want to include. But on the wireless communications restriction, program reporting requirements for employment placement and job training programs at the Guam Community College, University of Guam, the Guam Department of Labor. Any senator wish to be heard on it? Any objection to its continued inclusion in administrative provisions? Seeing or hearing none? The next section, authorization for legal services for the Department of Public Works, the Guam Building Code Council, and the Appeals Board. Any objection? Approval of financial agreements or arrangements. Seeing none? On the administrative provision that all matters related to the Pacific Community, formerly known as South Pacific Commission, and the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific shall fall under the purview of the Office of the Governor. Any objection to that continuing provision? Senior Citizen Center. Seeing none. Revenue Tracking Report. The Director of Bureau and Budget, in collaboration with Revenue and Tax and Administration, shall determine at the end of each month the revenue tracking for the balance of the fiscal year. Any comments or amendments? Senator Nicholas.
Just an inquiry, Mr. Chairman, to the committee. I know that we do have some language similar to this in the beginning part of the entire budget bill for tracking and reporting. I know that this was referenced.
This is duplicate.
I just want to make sure that we're not on page 6, section 4, and I want to make sure that we're not having any kind of a conflict in what's mentioned here in this section versus what we outlined in section 4.
Actual versus budget, this is tracking.
This proposed one is the tracking. The page 6 is the actual reports of revenue received.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any? None? Prior year appropriations report. Seeing none. On this next section, exemptions from BBMR, allotment release control, we have an earlier section that addresses that.
Section 5 of admin provision.
Section 5 of the administrative provisions. So,
We amended the
if everybody is okay, we'll go with what we're going to be putting in Chapter 13 as opposed to this one.
Yes.
Correct. All right.
This one also, section 22 of miscellaneous provision.
On this next one also, the special fund transfer, we have already addressed that, and that's in section 22 of miscellaneous provisions
Page 134.
on page 135. So it will not be necessary, all right? I just wanted, in transparency, to get it all out there, okay? Is that no, it's in miscellaneous.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
134.
Yep.
At the very bottom of page 134, section 22, special fund transfer. Okay? We've already addressed it.
You just mentioned the committee will accept these as codified sections.
Okay, we'll do that now. Next section, restriction on the home use of government vehicles. Except when expressly permitted by 1103 of Title IV or any other law, no government of Guam owned, leased, or rented vehicle may be driven home by an employee unless such employee is on call as an emergency first responder. Any objection to that provision? email addresses paid for with government Guam funds. All right. Quarterly statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in the fund balance report. Bless you. On that section, any senator wish to be heard? Senator Nicholas.
Again, Mr. Chairman, just to clarify that this section doesn't conflict with any of the other sections that we have in the existing budget bill, such as section 26 and 27 of the miscellaneous provisions, or the earlier part that we referenced in terms of reporting requirements.
No, this one's a quarterly report.
Just wanted to clarify that this doesn't, this does not, this does not in any way affect section 27, or can be interpreted to affect section 27 of the miscellaneous provisions.
Oh, no, it's just a reporting.
I've been advised it will not. This is just reporting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On this, any the next section is monthly cash balance reports for general and special funds. No objection? Thank you. That was painless, and I thank everybody for reviewing it last night so that you were ready to address it today. Yes, on the amendment by the majority leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and colleagues, having had to go through this last process of putting back these things, which OFB thought, and I thought as well, that the compiler of law, when she codified certain provisions of the Budget Act, I'm told that her thinking and the thinking of the compiler of law was that it was just going to be footnoted and it was only going to take effect for the current budget year. And our legal counsel has also expressed some concerns, and so I would like to make an amendment, move a new section in this chapter that says all provisions of this act that are not expressly codified by this act are deemed to apply to this act exclusively and shall not be codified. All provisions of prior fiscal year general appropriation acts that are not expressly codified by those respective prior fiscal year general appropriation acts are deemed to apply to those respective acts. The compiler of laws shall strike any provisions that the compiler codified from prior fiscal year general appropriations acts that were not expressly codified in such prior fiscal year general appropriations acts. And I think if this amendment passes, it'll certainly address the concern that I've raised.
Any senator wish to be heard on the Respicio amendment? Senator Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to commend our majority leader for proctoring this amendment. Every time we pass anything in the Budget Act, the assumption is that it's going to sunset after the fiscal year concludes. As with any budget, it should sunset after the fiscal year concludes. However, the act of codifying provisions that were placed in Budget Acts that weren't expressly directed to be codified, it creates the permanency of law that likely was not the intent of those who are placing them in as administrative provisions. Oftentimes, these provisions that we put into the Budget Act are with respect to ensuring that that particular budget is navigated and executed in a way for the time certain. But if those provisions are codified, then they become binding on future budgets without even the understanding or the knowledge of the legislatures that are addressing those budgets in those future times. And so this is a very, very proper amendment. It not only protects this existing budget, but it goes back and it makes sure that there's no previous provisions that were intended for that period only that have been codified and permanent. I would recommend that this become a permanent boilerplate language in every budget bill, just to make sure that it doesn't happen again in the future. Just a clarification, the amendment reads the end of section 8. It should read the end of section 13, at least the copy I have at the top. But it's the end of section 13, administrative provisions. And I just wanted clarification from the chair. I do have an amendment also.
I'm glad I'm not the only one having problems with Roman numerals.
I do have an amendment also for chapter 13, if I'll be afforded that opportunity.
Yes, you will.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do support the amendment.
I just want to state on the record, I hope that we can clarify. If all the colleagues will turn to page 134. At the bottom of page 134, there is an express amendment to an existing statute. Do we need to take a break to have everybody discuss with legal counsel how this will affect an amendment like the one that we have in here? All right, we'll take a short recess. Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I want to start by saying I appreciate the comments of the retiring speaker in recognizing, as we all do, the budget process. And when we adopt the budget and we have miscellaneous and administrative provisions that aren't codified, the idea is that those languages are used to administer the budget for that particular year. And so I just received an email from the Chief Justice, Robert Torres, saying that he apologizes for the aggravation this may have caused on the part of the compiler of laws. But you know, my response to him was that I certainly understand and appreciate what the compiler's attempting to do here. She's attempting to put a place in the Guam Code annotated, and I guess to make sure that there's all these provisions are properly accounted for, right? So, but there's no need to do that going forward, and this amendment makes it clear that those provisions that are not codified by the Budget Act shall not be codified in the Guam Code annotated. And so I want to make another motion along with this section that the legal counsel and OFB be authorized to go back and make those correct technical amendments throughout the budget, because as I understand it, OFB took the codification that the compiler did in order to make certain amendments, and it's reflected in this budget, and those sections also should not be codified. So I want to certainly give the latitude to the legal counsel, to OFB, and to yourself, Mr. Chairman, to make those technical amendments along with the adoption of this amendment.
Is there any objection to that? Thank you very much. On the Respicio amendment,
So that's on admin provisions at the end of admin provisions. So we're on page 155.
we are at the end of, well, of chapter 13, someplace after 155 with all these additions. And I understand Senator Nicholas has circulated an additional amendment to this chapter. Senator Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've circulated an amendment to my colleagues that states, notwithstanding any of the provision of law, rule, or regulation, any tax credits applied shall only be offset against budget items outlined in Chapter 5 of this Act. What this amendment seeks to do, Mr. Chairman, is protect health, education, and public safety in particular from the eroding effects of tax credits eating away at their revenue base. And if tax credits are going to be authorized and they are going to be redeemed, they will be redeemed only out of Chapter 5. Chapter 5 pretty much is the executive branch budget of the government of Guam. And the reason why Chapter 5 is an appropriate place is because the agencies within Chapter 5 are the ones who are authorizing the tax credits, and they're the ones that are offsetting the tax credits. But within Chapter 5, as it currently stands, those agencies are not affected by any of those decisions. With this amendment, it will serve as a check and balance to make sure that the idea of issuing and authorizing tax credits is taken with the understanding that the very entities responsible for that determination are the ones who are going to have to figure out how to live within the means that are left after the reduction in their budget that will occur with the application of these tax credits. We cannot continue to allow, Mr. Chairman, tax credits to eat away at health, education, or public safety. The Guam Department of Education, with this current budget, relies on $17 million in property taxes from the Territorial Educational Facilities Fund. If tax credits are redeemed against those property taxes, DOE can come up short again in fiscal year 2015. The Guam Memorial Hospital Authority relies on about 20% of its budget coming from the Healthy Futures Fund, the alcohol and tobacco taxes that also were greatly eroded in FY2014 due to the application of tax credits. The Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center saw a reduction of 20%, may see a reduction of up to 20% of its budget, because that's how much they are also depending on the Healthy Futures Fund that receives alcohol and tobacco taxes that have been decimated by the redemption of tax credits in FY 2014. And public health, with its huge mandate to address the public health concerns of our community, has 10% of its overall budget relying on the Healthy Futures Fund that saw its amounts reduced because of tax credits. So, Mr. Chairman, this amendment is not going to stop the issuance of tax credits. It's not going to say that tax credits cannot be redeemed. All it says is that if they are going to be redeemed, they shall be applied strictly to Chapter 5 of this budget in order to protect health, education, public safety, and the other two branches of government from the authorization and the redemption of tax credits that is very strictly within the realm entirely of Chapter 5 altogether. So, Mr. Chairman, I ask my colleagues to please support this amendment so that we can make sure that health, education, and public safety throughout fiscal year 2015 don't get negatively impacted by any kind of tax credit redemptions to their respective funding sources. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Nicholas. I see Senator Yamashita and then Senator Duenas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker. Mr. Vice Speaker, while I think I understand what the mover of this amendment is wanting to do to ensure that those 3 priority items are protected, it would seem to me that we would want all of the agencies who construct that whole landscape about how to, in a most innovative manner, make ends meet and continue to meet the needs, the changing needs of health, education, and public safety. They would be, I think, perhaps in a best position to decide how to best do that. Mr. Vice Speaker, just this past term, we passed legislation that would help our school system. And the way we were doing that was through tax credits. And through that mechanism sponsored by Madam Speaker, we're going to get Simon Sanchez and I think a whole host of schools up and renovated. And we're also going to get a master plan actually developed, I hope. But it was through that scheme. And so I'm not sure that while they benefit from that, I'm not sure why we would say that it would only go or held up towards the Chapter 5 agencies. I'm not sure. And I will admit that this is not, I'm not an expert in this area, but just from the first read of it, it would seem that we would want the people making these decisions to have all of those tools at their disposal to make the widest and the wisest decisions best, and not curtail all of those particular opportunities or strategies that could be in the best interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Yamashita. Senator Duenas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think that what we're see in this particular amendment being moved is essentially a rehash of what we discussed yesterday. And so for that reason, I would say that the subject matter of this proposed amendment would be a great bill. And it'd be a great bill so that we could discuss this issue in the context of the commitment that was made in the formulation and implementation of the tax credit program. So for that reason, Mr. Chairman, I would object and I call the question.
Thank you. The question has been called, but I will allow the mover to go ahead and close if he wishes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do understand the perspective of my colleagues, and I want to make it clear that this amendment is in no way intended to be any kind of, effort to cause any kind of consternation. The realities are very clear in fiscal year 2014. Education and public health, especially education and health, have been having revenue problems, and their revenue problems are with respect to the Territorial Educational Facilities Fund that gets property taxes, and the Healthy Futures Fund that gets alcohol and tobacco taxes, both of which have been impacted by tax credits, the latter most especially. And throughout this budget, attempts have been made to try and insulate education and insulate health from that same impact for fiscal year 2015. Unfortunately, those efforts initially, directly with respect to their budgets, did not materialize. Unfortunately, a provision that was within this act that would have protected the Healthy Futures Fund was also amended and removed. And so I'm really just making a sincere effort here to try and make sure that health and education and public safety, but especially the two previous ones, because they're the ones that were most impacted by these tax credits. I'm trying to make a sincere effort here to make sure that doesn't happen in FY2015, because we're looking at this budget, we're looking at these numbers, and so are those prospective agencies with the understanding that that's what they're going to be able to operate with. That's what they're going to use to meet their service missions to the people of Guam. And that's the money that we're committing for our school children, for our sick, for our elderly, for our adult daycare, for our adult care programs, for all the many, many good things that we have going on throughout our education and health operations. And if we are truly committed to these revenue numbers, we must make sure that throughout fiscal year 2015, those revenue numbers aren't going to be eroded by tax credits that are going to come in and eat away at those funding streams. And so I would very much like for this amendment to be considered by my colleagues. If the issue is having it offset against Chapter 5 only, I am willing to entertain an amendment to the amendment that states that notwithstanding any other provision of law, rule, or regulation, no tax credits shall be applied to Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, which is education and health in particular. So I'm going to put that out there for my colleagues. If somebody wants to proffer that amendment to amendment, I'll be all for that. But the intention here, Mr. Chairman, is sincerely just to make sure that education and health, in particular, who are most adversely impacted, don't have the same problem in FY2015 as we have seen in FY2014. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the dialogue with my colleagues.
All right, the question has been called. All those in favor of this Nicholas amendment, please indicate by raising your right hand. Motion fails. Senator Nicholas.
Due to the question being called, Mr. Chairman, on the previous amendment, I would like to take this opportunity, then perhaps my colleagues might entertain another amendment similar to what I described, which basically would read, notwithstanding any other provision of law, rule, or regulation, no tax credits shall be applied against the budget items outlined in Chapters 2 and 3 of this Act, which is education and health. It's 2 and 3, right?
On that amendment,
Objection, call the question.
the question has been called. All those in favor of the Sir Nicholas amendment, please indicate by raising your hand. Motion fails. Any other amendments you wish to add to Chapter 13 before we gavel it closed? I don't want to miss anybody, so please. Is any amendment out there? Can we close Chapter 13? Chapter 14, Public Safety Recruitment and Allocations. In this chapter, we created a public safety pool, vacancy pool account, and I believe there's an amendment by Senator Yamashita. Senator Yamashita, you recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Vice Chair, this amendment replicates what we had done for Chapter 15 in that some of these particular positions have been filled already and were not captured by the documents that were in place when the budget was actually crafted and forwarded. And all this amendment attempts to do is to ensure that those cycles or those positions that have been filled that would come from these particular monies will continue to be filled. These are all classified positions, so they're not people to be hired for 1 month, 2 months, whatever it might be. And so those would be on line 18, and it would be for positions unfilled at the beginning of fiscal year 2015, and this is the amendment, and for positions filled prior to the enactment of this act for the specified agency. Again, these are classified positions for these particular agencies.
Any other senator wish to be heard on this amendment? Any objection? Seeing none, amendment adopted. Senator Winnie Barnes, you have an amendment to this chapter?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair and Manana Situis. Maybe just asking for a clarification based on the amendment that was just proffered earlier, Mr. Chair. Looking at adding to that pool to make sure that the conservation officers from the Department of Agriculture is included so that they could be given that fair chance. And I know that we did do some discussions earlier because you said it was also mentioned in section 2 of that, and I just wanted to see if there were, based on technical advice, if that would be inclusive of those conservation officers, knowing that her amendment just passed. So just wanting that clarification. Or do we have to spell it out?
The pool in chapter 14,
Is for
as OFB and I had written it, was for GPD, DOC, DYA, and GFD, for those specific purposes. The pool to be created in chapter 15 does include everybody at agriculture. So your concerns we can deal with in agriculture in 15.
Thank you for that clarification. Santa Masi.
On chapter 14, any other senator wish to be heard? Any objection to 14? Thank you. Chapter 15, classified vacancies for executive branch agency and department cost pool account. To include the departments of BBMR, DOA, DRT, DOL, Agriculture, Guam Behavioral Wellness Center, and or DPR. Did you wish to be heard, Senator Yamashita? No? Go ahead, Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me first start off by assuring you and our colleagues that I'll stick to my commitment and not move any amendment. However, I do wish to put on record my dissatisfaction with this provision, and I stated it from the get-go when we were in the first part of this budget, when we sacrificed the provisions of tax refunds to set aside $3 million to hire new people in this government. And so, as we went through this budget, I would of course commend you and OFB and our colleagues for really going through this budget smoothly. And what seems to appear as a balanced budget, you add the numbers together, sure, it's a balanced budget. But I strongly believe that when you take a look now at this $3 million that we sacrificed to lower down our tax refund provision, in reality, it's not a balanced budget. How can it be a balanced budget when we know that increments for some of our employees in the government of Guam haven't been paid? How can it be a balanced budget when we know that provisions for health care are not fully funded? How can this be a balanced budget if public safety is not fully funded? And sure, $3 million is a small amount when you compare it to the millions more that is needed for health care provisions in our community, but it just doesn't sit well with me. And as this provision may have been the game changer for a lot of us in this hall here, this may be a game changer for me in terms of supporting this budget in its totality. And so I just would like to state for the record that it's a hard decision to make for me, for myself, knowing that with all the struggles that we're having in this government, that we're setting aside $3 million to hire new people. In a private business, when you're having difficulties and challenges, you take care of what needs to be paid first, the priorities, and not put this money aside and say, you know what, we're going to hire more people. especially in election year, Mr. Speaker. And so these are, of course, this is just my my sentiments and my feelings of this provision. And so I would just like to say that for the record and not move any amendment at this time. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Rodriguez. I understand what you're saying. I wish we could have provided for everything, unfortunately. I would have loved to have also provided for my ALJ for CLC, but I'll introduce the legislation and deal with that later. I won't ask. On Chapter 15. We've now completed all 15 chapters of the budget. Mr. Majority Leader, do we take a break? I guess if anybody, do we have comments now before we rise, or? It's early enough. We're thinking about it. Oh, okay. Let's have some comments, because I understand legal counsel wants to make sure that before we rise that everything that's in here is taken care of, and so. But I will use the time at this point. If Senator Rodriguez has had an opportunity to state his concerns, Senator San Nicolas and Senator Limtiaco, Senator Uggan, Senator Morrison. Yes. You may.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, just some general comments on the budget, many of which we've expressed, or I expressed during the review of the revenue stream and from what we've had in our talks. This budget, and I want to thank the body, I think this process has been very efficient in how we've proceeded. We've gotten the answers to the questions that we needed regarding the revenue projections. We've addressed some of the liabilities that have been long overdue, but as we discussed in the revenues, we're finally starting to have some good years, and we are addressing liabilities that we have to. But I must express my concern that we have yet to address the long-term liabilities of our government, and I don't know when we will ever be able to do that, because it's not going to take one legislature or one two-term governor to address. It's going to take decades of a commitment to pay down and to address the long-term debt of the government. And just bearing in fact the retirement fund debt obligations alone, and the changing in the accounting principles and how that's going to affect on the total financial status of our government, it's beyond the next 3, 4, 5 legislatures. It's going to take a commitment from all leaders from now for the next decade or so to really make a concerted effort to address these issues and to put our government back on track, because that money that we're going to free up from the debt service is going to have a substantial impact on how we can run the operations of our government and address all those items that we've failed to address in the last 10, 15, 20 years. So yes, does this budget address 2015? It appears to do so, provided that those revenue streams come to fruition. Will it address the long overdue debt service of our government and the overall impact of where our government will be 10 years from now? It does not, and neither did last year's budget. And my concern is where we are going to go in the future, and who will bear the liability, who will bear the burden of the decisions that we make today. And although that we are restricted in addressing everything, I believe that the 2015 budget that soon should be passed does address the short-term goals of the next fiscal year, but it does a disservice to the long-term viability and financial stability of our government. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Lumtiaco. Senator San Nicolas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share some of the sentiments of the retiring speaker. Going into this entire budget and going through this entire budget has been challenging. Our revenues for fiscal year 2014 started out at $762 million, and we are now bringing it up substantially by about $65 million for FY2015. The assumptions used based on tracking, based on growth expectations, they may very well come to fruition, but they may not also. I mean, the realities of the world is that there could be a whole number of variables that can come into play that can cause revenues to come in lower than we've anticipated. What we have not done is make sure that those revenues are going to be airtight with respect to the likelihood of those variables. What we have done, and this is where I wanted to express my deep gratitude to the chair, is we have included two sections in this budget that serve to create an environment where we'll be able to make sure that we're on the right track. Section 26 creates a limitation on expenditures, wherein we do recognize the revenues. However, we're funding the first 2 quarters of the fiscal year fully, and then we're going to have to look at the budget again come March and say, are we or are we not actually bringing in those revenues? Every quarter of this fiscal year, the executive branch is going to have to provide a report showing whether or not we're tracking or meeting our revenue expectations. And if we don't, at any time in any quarter, meet those revenue expectations, the government is going to be required to start planning for a budgetary environment that is lower than what we projected in this budget. I share the sentiments of the chair on the Committee on Health with respect to the outstanding liabilities that we still owe. A great deal of them we still owe. And while the budget that we have here attempts to address those to a large degree, it does also further enhance our ongoing cost of operations by permitting additional hiring that I really have to sit back and reconcile. Because what I ask myself is, how did we do in fiscal year 2014? Did any services to the people of Guam in fiscal year 2014 fail? And the answer is no. Now, could they be improved? The answer absolutely is yes. But is the solution always to go out and hire in order to achieve those improvements? My first initial reaction is no. Let's look at technology, let's look at efficiencies, let's look at performance, let's look at moving around people so the best person for the job is in the actual right position. And there are so many ways that we can tweak operational efficiency without having to hire. And that's where I get really, really uncomfortable, because once you increase hiring, that's a permanent liability to this government, because that's a position that's going to be filled and funded for a 30-year career. So when we do that, we create a permanent expense item for this government. And so with respect to all of that, Mr. Chairman, I put all those things into consideration, and then I take into account how we're going to be safeguarding against any kind of revenue shortfalls, and I try to make myself comfortable. But then we go out and remove a provision in this budget bill that would have protected against the ravenous effects of tax credits against the revenue streams of this government. The tax credits that ate away the budget that our Guam Memorial Hospital depends on. The tax credits that could eat away further at the budget that our school system depends on. And in multiple instances throughout this process, I tried to create the safeguards against that, and they failed. And the provision that was in this budget that would have protected at least a degree of that has been removed. And so my degree of comfort, even if we have these safeguards in here in sections 26 and 27, my degree of comfort with this budget is severely compromised. Because not only do we have a $65 million increase in revenue, but we also have the door wide open for tax credits to be issued that can undermine those revenue expectations with respect to the dependency of those agencies and the funding streams that could be impacted. So I have a problem, Mr. Chairman, and I cannot at this time firmly commit to supporting this budget with respect to the increase in the revenue and how the tax credit situation that has been removed from this budget can potentially and very likely cause a lot of financial harm that we're going to have to face and reckon with over the next 12 months. So I thank the committee for their hard work, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for putting that tax credit provision in here that unfortunately was removed. I'm going to have to try and reconcile now how comfortable I can be voting for this budget, knowing that those risks are out there, the risks that our $65 million revenue increase projections don't come in, the risk that even if they do come in, the tax credits are going to erode it. Those are very real risks that I need to consider, and I will consider them very heavily. But I thank you, and I thank the Office of Finance and Budget for their very hard work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Nicholas. Senator Ugg, and then Senator Morrison, then Senator Duenas, then Senator McCready.
Thank you very much, and good morning to you, Mr. Chairman, again, and to our colleagues. You know, I think in terms of looking at this budget, first of all, I just need to extend my personal perspective and observation in regards to how you have facilitated this, considering the circumstances over the course of the last 30 days. So, Mr. Chairman, I think you've done an outstanding job in terms of not only presenting a budget that is acceptable, but that a budget that all of us came to the table on more than 1, 2, 3 occasions, and we were able to discuss some of the provisions and the priorities in funding the government of Guam. Also, the Office of Finance and Budget, in terms of putting the revenues together, taking a look at the overall expenditure pattern of the government of Guam, looking at where some of these resources can be allocated based on what the Chief Executive had transmitted to this body in January of this year. I think we've come up with a budget that will not resolve every single outstanding obligation out there, but addresses the operational requirements and above and beyond that of this government of Guam over the course of fiscal year 15. And I say above and beyond because in a conjunction with the standard operating requirements and the revenues and the expenses of this government in fiscal year 14, OFB and yourself still had to ensure that we compensated our law enforcement personnel and make sure that they continue to retain that pay adjustment into fiscal year 15 and into the future. You also provided the compensation, the Competitive Wage Act provision in terms of allowing all of the employees to look at 100% compensation in fiscal year 15 and also identify some resources to see if in fact the chief executive can apply it retro to January 26 and pay all the employees who were not paid at 100%. You know, it boils down to revenue projection, whether in fact this government will realize the revenues. And that's where this body, not only in terms of being able to identify the revenue projections, Mr. Chairman, but being able to help facilitate the conduct of business out there. And that's, I think, the next big challenge. Right before us and come early quarter of next year, we will officially receive word on the record of decision, whether in fact the military buildup will proceed. That, once that is released, you already know, Mr. Chairman, and members of this body, that will start turning the wheels in terms of getting investors to take a second look at Guam and be able to begin additional investments into our island community. We saw that in 2010, and then there was a halt in the entire process, and should the record decision be released first quarter of next year, then obviously things will bode extremely well for our community moving forward. But I just want to say that you know, when you look at the overall budget, there still remains outstanding obligations. The chairman of health alluded to one major component with regards to GMH and the employees. That's an outstanding obligation that we certainly need to not only recognize, but we need to, over the course of the next several months, try to identify the resources. If in fact there's a surplus in this fiscal year moving forward, after applying all of the expenses that are authorized in this budget bill, then certainly some of those surpluses can be utilized to address obligations such as that. Because, Mr. Chairman, I was at a meeting last night with a number of veterans. And apparently, this veteran came up to me and shared with me about whether, in fact, this government is going to continue to provide support to our veteran community. And I had to go back through a multitude of benefits that veterans are provided today by their local government outside of the federal system, and then also share with them that, yes, a permanent home has to be found for the veterans, the Guam Veterans Affairs Office, so that in fact they can accommodate and work well with some of the other veteran service organizations island-wide. And I shared with this individual because obviously the concern was we need it today. We need to visibly see some of these activities take place today. But I shared with this veteran that every single member of this body shares similar concerns in terms of not only finding a permanent home for the Guam Veterans Affairs Office, but also continuing to recognize the services that our men and women in the armed forces have provided to our island and to our country. And I close with that statement, Mr. Chairman, because yes, there's still a lot of work ahead of us. Whether it be addressing outstanding obligations, whether it be addressing new initiatives so that in fact we can help facilitate business activities on island, whether it be looking at this military buildup and seeing how it can be mutually beneficial to the civilian community in conjunction with national defense. Because that's really where the challenge comes in. And in a meeting that I just was a participant in, it both, I think the opportunities are there, the funding mechanism is anticipated to start providing that direct support to our local community in terms of infrastructure and in terms of facilities, should that record of decision be finalized. So things will, at least from my perspective, and barring any unforeseen either natural disasters or economic situation that would directly affect our community, I think things bode very well for our future over the course of the next 4 to 5 years, and we certainly hope that we can glean from that and ensure that every single person that calls Guam home is able to visibly see the benefits and visibly be part of that particular process. So, Mr. Chairman, I stand in direct recognition of your efforts, direct recognition of the staff of OFB, and certainly the collaboration. Perhaps the first time I've seen this in the multiple terms that I've served, the strong collaboration and willingness of both sides of the aisle to be able to come up with a budget that is acceptable and that both parties can agree on. And I certainly look forward to the vote that ultimately is rendered in this budget that you have chaired. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to express my appreciation for OFB and for all the work they've done working with the committee to put this before us and answer the questions and make it clear for us so we can move forward. Mr. Chair, I just want to also acknowledge the efforts that you have made through along the lines of this spirit of cooperation, bringing both aisles together and seeing a reality come out of that those meetings, a reality of addressing most of the issues that we discussed in those meetings. I also like to share the collaboration with the administration, that the efforts you've made listening to their concerns that to address in moving this budget forward. I'll be real brief, Mr. Chair. At the end of the day, we've all acknowledged that there's no perfect bill. We all do our best with this body to provide as much as we can to make legislation functional. As at the end of the day, we pass legislation. We want it to have the ability to be executed. So when we go down the line of talking to many of these agencies, the one questions that I've always asked, and I think you've always asked, will this budget still allow you to meet the mission and objectives of your agencies? And most of those questions have been answered. And I believe on top of that, you will see that in his budgets there have been increases to in the areas of education, public safety, and public health. Of course, we all know we can't meet every need out there, but we are seeing progress in that area of getting there. And at the end of the day, if we know that we are getting there, I think that is something that we can all acknowledge through this body. So, Mr. Chair, I thank you for your efforts. I thank the body for their input throughout this process. It's been a great learning experience, and it's been very smooth. And thank OFB, thank the fiscal team as well, and the administration, and for providing us information so we can make informed decisions going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Morrison. Senator Duenas.
Undangkulun si Jus Masi para Hagu, Senior Chairman and Todui Office and Finance of Budget for a very comprehensive and smooth budget process. Mr. Chairman, for many years now, when I have been asked in different forums, how do I approach the budget of the government of Guam? My answer was, the formula I use is projection, collection, and economic development. My own personal 3 pillars of the approach on how I look at whether or not I can agree with what has been presented in a budget document. Mr. Chairman, a good friend of mine and mentor, Governor Joe Ada, and I have a lunch from time to time just to talk about anything really, but of course mostly about politics and government finances. And having been a 2-term governor, during some pretty good times, he has, and also seen lean times, he has some very good perspectives. The one thing I always appreciate in our discussions is his constant discussions with me, and one of the reasons why even I thank you, Mr. Chairman, will address a bill next week with regard to unfunded federal mandates. In one of our lunches, he said, boy, I think by the time you add up all of the unfunded mandates on an annual basis, it could approach, at a conservative minimum, perhaps the entire general fund revenues that we adopt. Secretary Work, Undersecretary Work just made a declaration last week that he is a champion for working with us on the visa waiver for China. So we got collection. We got to work with our congressman. We got to work with our governor. We've got to pound on doors and pound on doors and pound on doors. Not with our hand out, but with a declaration that we are part of the American family. And we are not stepchildren. And despite many obligations, and despite 1/3 of our land resources used for the defense of the nation, we come to say we're going to ask again for our piece of the bread from the loaf. And the realignment, Mr. Speaker, we know, once again, under economic development, the potential spend, making our government, how much of this bill? I think there's some in here to make our government more business friendly. And I bet you there's going to be a lot of bills in the coming days and coming months and coming years to make our government more business friendly so we can continue to move that economic development arm so that we do have these resources that we debate on this floor on an annual basis to help run our government, to help our people, to provide for good education, public safety, and health care. These evil tax credits. You know, in lean times, we made that decision. Should we revisit it? Yes. Should we revisit it in the context of, as one of my good colleagues said, changing the rules in the middle of the game? I don't think so. That's why I'm comfortable, Mr. Chairman, as difficult as it is, and as hard as it is to sit here and make it look sometimes like maybe we're not in support of those critical areas, which is the furthest thing from the truth for any one of us in this room. But we'll stick with the rules of the game, and I'm glad that was the will of the majority of the body. So moving to my last 2 points, Mr. Chairman. I once again take issue and just differ with my good friend, the Chairman on Health, and what we were able to spend 3 days in talks, maybe 4 days, Mr. Chairman. And one of the comments that I made in the media, and I believe this to be true because it is true, when we emerged from those discussions, there was no deal here. There was no, hey, give me this over here and give me this over here, and then we'll walk out there and shake hands and drop the gavel. The numbers were the same, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, with the exception of the restoration of the budgets to critical agencies such as BBMR, DOA, DRT, Department of Labor, Agriculture, Behavioral Wellness, and DPR. Unfunded vacancies. Funded vacancies, excuse me. Hiring classified employees in an election year? Since this government has had its feet under it, under our control and otherwise, that has been and will always be a practice. Classified employees, certified by DOA, going through the merit system. That's what we did here, Mr. Chairman. We locked it in because you insisted on it. And I agree with it. Agree with that move. So, Mr. Chairman, I want to close by wholeheartedly agreeing with my good friend and unfortunately not running again, Senator Limtiaku, in his declaration that when we join hands together and go after the collection of tens of millions of dollars that's owed to this government under the Projection, Collection, and Economic Development arm, and we go and make this government more business friendly and collect from the federal government from unfunded mandates, that we do precisely what my good colleague said. Commit to paying down the debt of this government, to balancing the books, to fully funding those priorities before we do anything else, and get to that day of utopia, hopefully, that we all can arrive at. But there's a formula here. Everybody stated it eloquently and properly. Is this a perfect document? No. Will it run this government for fiscal year 15 in an efficient and proper manner? I believe so. And that's why, Mr. Chairman, I can vote for this budget in the affirmative, as unperfect as it is, and thank you for assuming the helm and the reins of this very difficult process in a difficult time. I don't like to use these kind of words, Mr. Chairman, but you've done one hell of a job. Situs Masi.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator McCready, then Senator Respicio. And to any other senator who wishes to just indicate by raising your hand, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first want to commend you on the outstanding job that you have done here for this budget. You basically had a tiger by its tail, and that tiger could have turned around and bit you, or you could have kept that tiger on track and moving forward. And that is exactly what you did, and for that, I commend you. I would also like to commend Ricky and Selena from OFB and the entire OFB staff who has been here answering questions day by day. We passed a nearly $700 million bill, a spending bill. And the way we did it, Mr. Speaker, wasn't about Democrats or Republicans, wasn't about the left or the right side. We did it together as a team, which people elect us to do. I really believe, after hearing some of these seasoned politicians who have been here for more than 10 years, this was an education to all of us, not just the senators, but to the staff, to the management, to our employees, to the public, is that when we hit an impasse in whatever we do in this legislature, that we remember how we got to this point. Remember these days, these last 2 weeks, and how we balanced this $700+ million budget. How we were able to have teamwork with respect, responsible dialogue, and debate. The caucuses of common sense is what I like to say. And what I think was the most important factor of this budget process, Mr. Chairman, which you facilitated, was we allowed the front office and Adelup input that was important to passing this budget. We've never had that before. And for you to open that up to not just this body, but to the people of Guam, shows us what we can do if we just work together. Not one man is able to run this government by him or herself. We all need help. We all need assistance, and we all need dialogue. We all need guidance. And for that, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I thank you because you offered that to us, and you gave that to us, and we followed you, and we followed your lead. And I heard that throughout this whole entire process, was if Mr. Chairman is for it, I'm going to follow his lead. And we all joined together in those sentiments. Without that, I don't think we would be here finishing up on a budget, making final comments, and a budget that I think is going to pass and not be vetoed. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, I echo the sentiments of some of the former speakers. Did everyone in this body get what they wanted? And it never happens, and it never will happen. Is this a perfect budget? None of us is perfect, but we gave perfect effort. We were here every day making sure that our amendments either got proffered and shut down, or proffered and accepted by this body. And that is all we can ask for from our colleagues. For that, I would like to thank our entire 14 of us and their staff and the management of this legislature for helping us move forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Senator McCready. Mr. Majority Leader. Oh. Senator Tony Ada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Speaker. You know, these past 2 weeks have been really, week and a half, 2 weeks has been really a learning experience, but it also has been a rewarding experience at the same time. You know, with the passing of Speaker Ben in the middle of a budget, and you taking the helm from that point on, it just goes to show your stewardship and your leadership, along with the folks from OFB, you know, to continue the work on of our government and of our body. I thank you for that, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, and to OFB, thank you for all your hard work that you guys have put in, all the long hours, and not just during the budget hearings, but also for our session. You know, it's not easy all the amendments that are proffered and looking back and where are we going to look at these numbers or those numbers, and once you look at a number, they all start to look alike, and how you guys dissect it and put it back together, and it's truly amazing. But you guys did it, and working along with the chairman, the vice speaker, and also with the administration and all colleagues here. Also Speaker Ben, when he had the helm. These are times that are, nothing is ever perfect, but at least we went in with due diligence to work together to ensure that what we come out with is acceptable not only to our government agencies and leaders, but also to the people. So, Mr. Chairman, with that said, once again, I'd like to thank you for your leadership, and to OFB, thank you for all that you have done, and working also with the administration. Thank you guys very much.
Mr. Majority Leader.
You didn't hear what I said, Mr. Chairman, but I said, Brant, move. So I say that with all due respect. No, only because you were blocking my way, and I wanted to have eye contact with the chairman and the staff and the people that I'm going to address. So thank you, Senator McCready, and also thank you for your comments, as well as all of the comments of our colleagues that recognize the process. You know, I'm one of the few senators in this room that have that 10-year service, which you referenced, and I want to say that over the last several terms, we've seen many variations of a budget process. Mr. Chairman, and like you and like the rest of us in this body, I think if we commit to a process that's fair and above board, the outcome will take care of itself. And over the years, we've seen budget processes that have been very contentious. We've seen budget processes that have been very smooth. One of the concerns that I've raised a few terms ago was to provide for a budget process that's vetted through the Office of Finance and Budget by creating that kind of structure, by having the revenue estimates that the governor projects, having them adopted by the Special Economic Services Group, so that, and the Special Accounting Services Group, so that you have the classified GovGuam employees be the one to participate in what our revenue estimates ought to be. Mr. Chairman, we've seen revenue estimates in the past that coincidentally match the expenditure requirement of this government, but gone are those days, and I want to say that we started out this process when the governor submitted his budget bill, calling on revenue estimates that are going to be in the $65 million increase, and so that process was vetted by the Special Economic Services Group. The Office of Finance and Budget tweaked those numbers a little bit so that it'll be in line with what the office has been tracking, but it's not much different from what the governor, SES, projected. And also in this process, we've gone from a very smooth budget process to a budget process last year where there was a big fight. But the big fight was not about the budget process, but more so about restoring the cost of living allowances, was to fund the law enforcement pay, was to fund the hay requirement. And so we got through all of that last year, and there was consensus to stay the course under the leadership and stewardship of Speaker Pangilinan. So we stayed the course in this budget. In this budget bill, we also saw two amendments that mirrored Bill 309, the law enforcement pay as well as the hay pay. And so there was none of that stuff this time around. There was a lot of discipline. There was collegiality. More specifically, there was rules of engagement. And in the middle of this, Mr. Chairman, we lost our good colleague, Speaker Pangilinan. And I want to let the community know that one of the first things that you and Speaker Wampet did after Speaker Ben passed away was very privately met with the Office of Finance and Budget staff. And you've communicated to them with Speaker Wampet that everything will be status quo, that although we lost a good friend and colleague and his passing was unexpected, everything in that office was going to remain the same. The Speaker appointed you to be acting chair of Appropriations and Office of Finance and Budget in an acting capacity, and I want the community to also know that you were never looking to seek that office. You never wanted to be the permanent chairman of that committee. You, to this very day, you've agreed, Mr. Chairman, to remain in an acting capacity to the end of the term, so that as a legislature, as a body, we can honor our colleague's wishes before he passed on that he was going to retire. So as a body, we're going, for all intents and purposes, we're going to honor his wish and we're going to retire him. And we're going to do that by not trying to make you the permanent chairman of appropriations chairman of appropriations and all the other committees that Speaker Ben had oversight over, more specifically over the budget process. And you've been very clear to point out that these revenue estimates were his numbers prior to his passing. And so I commend you, Mr. Chairman. I respect you. You're firm, you're fair, you're very tough, and at times you had to step down from the chair to crack the whip, but you know that you're a man of integrity and you understand loyalties. And I don't think there'd be many people in your position that would be willing to serve in an acting capacity for the end of the term, and to show how much we respected our good colleague that passed on. I don't think there are many people like you. And so I want to memorialize these private discussions that we've been having, particularly with the staff of the Office of Finance and Budget, and to kind of make these private conversations public so that the people of Guam know that we're a legislative body with a lot of heart and a lot of compassion, and that we take care of our own from both sides of the aisle, and that we treat every single legislative employee from both sides of the aisle like we would members of our own family. And so you are no different in this case, and I commend you wholeheartedly and sincerely, and I know that every single member of this body echo the sentiments I've just expressed. So having said that, you know, we've engaged in a budget process, and now we're at this point where I'm going to make the customary motion to rise from the...
I think legal counsel also wanted an opportunity to be able to look at things before we rose,
Okay,
just in case.
Okay, so let me just conclude then by saying that I'm very comfortable with the budget that we're going to be voting on. I will be voting yes on this budget that says further substitute on the floor. With the issue, and with all due respect to the discussions on tax credits, Mr. Chairman, I understand why you made an amendment to provide the tax credits cannot be taken toward the alcohol and tobacco taxes. But again, there's a provision in law that requires the Department of Administration to reimburse those accounts. And so if those accounts are still owing, then that's something that needs to be done, maybe through the help of the Attorney General, since we do purportedly have a budget surplus, or maybe through public pressure to say that those accounts need to be made whole again, because those programs, the Healthy Futures Fund, funds very significant and very important programs throughout the government of Guam. And also, for all the agencies that I have oversight over, Mr. Chairman and colleagues, you know, I'm very process-oriented, and I believe that my agencies, you know, we funded all the critical agencies, and I want to recognize you for doing that. We either met the governor's request or we've exceeded it. But there's this other agencies that got several, you know, minor cuts for one reason or the other. In my agencies, you know, a few of the directors have asked for an increase, and I told them, you have to go back to BBMR, you have to work with the governor, you have to have BBMR identify, if they're going to increase your agency, that they would have to identify a corresponding decrease. And I did that to support the difficulties you had in trying to balance all these needs with very limited resources. So we'll recess. Oh.
I just wanted a very short opportunity before you make that motion.
Okay,
so
so
before you do.
I'll just conclude my comments by thanking you, thanking OFB, thanking the clerk's office as well as our legal counsel for all the work that they've done to get us to this point. Thank you.
Thank you. First let me thank all of you for the collegiality and the cooperation that we've shown each other over the last couple of weeks. And though I appreciate all the accolades that you have attempted to heap on me, I have to be honest. Those compliments and accolades belong to that burning candle on that desk on the side of the room. This budget was 98% prepared before his untimely passing. The decisions to create the pool for public safety was his. The decision to increase the COLA was his. And not only had he made all of those decisions, but probably the best thing that he ever did, at least for me, was that he left me with a phenomenal staff at OFB. As has been said, I need lessons in accounting. I have a phenomenal staff at OFB that has managed to take care of me over the last couple of months and made me look very good, and I want to thank all of you. But really, the compliment belongs to them because they were the ones that took a budget that may have not been properly accounted for. The additional 2 branches, education hadn't been provided for, and they somehow managed to work out where education got 98% of what they were requesting, and so we didn't have the presidents hanging out in the committee room. They were able to work out the plans that Senator Ben had left with them on creating the pools so that we can make sure that public safety was taken care of. And I share the concerns by the chairman of health that unfortunately we could not provide everything that health, and especially Guam Memorial Hospital, needed. But we attempted, or the Office of Finance and Budget and the committee attempted to provide a balanced budget and try to stay within the revenue projections. And I know that there are some issues as to whether or not those projections are real. I can state unequivocally that I support, I stand by them. I made OFB walk me through them so that I could defend them, and I can defend them. And that was because my predecessor left me with a phenomenal staff at OFB. And I believe so I thank them for making me look good and making you think that I look great, but it really is not me, it's them, and the fact that my predecessor has managed to put together a phenomenal staff at OFB that managed to work this through. But I just want to thank all of you again for the collegiality that we've shown and to each other over the last couple of weeks. I'm sure it was a personality side that you hadn't seen of me. I'm usually throwing the tantrums and walking out. But I think maybe someone was guiding me to sit still and listen. And so I'm very happy that we've gotten to this point. But again, I really do think that all the honor and accolades belong to the late Senator Ben Pangilinan for having put this budget together and for having left all of us a great staff at OFB that could help us put this together and even have Adelup agree that it was an excellent budget that we could all support. So thank you very much, all of you, for your efforts. And I'm hoping that the way that we've been able to be open with each other, and I know many of you were shocked with my sending you emails with things attached to it. I think it's important that we all try to address each other and realize that there's 14 of us that need to get through this. And so I again thank you all. I want to especially thank the entire OFB staff, especially Vicki and Selena and Bertha and everybody else there. Just to make you know, I mean, I wasn't micromanaging. I don't even know all the names at OFB, except for Ricky and Selena, because I trusted them so implicitly, and I told them that they were going to make me look good, that I didn't have to go over there and sit on them. And so I've just been saying, in fact, I now know the names, Uriah and Ariana also. But just so that everybody understands that that was the way that I handled them, that I knew that they were going to do an excellent job because I knew that my predecessor had left me with a phenomenal staff, and they had done a good job over the last several years. And so I thank him and recognize his memory, and thank the staff for their excellent work. And I thank all of you for your collegiality and your cooperation in trying to work this through. I just hope now that we don't have to be back with this next week. And, as you, hopefully we can continue to have our public hearings that have been noticed. We're going to try to get as many hearings as possible out. And again, thank you very much. And we will, I believe, recess. Just what I'd like to do is, what time? If we can just quickly come back at 5. Hopefully there is very little that needs to be done. I think we can probably vote on this today.
Could we do it at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock?
Oh, okay.
Instead of 5?
3? At 3 o'clock, hopefully the legal staff and OFB want to go through and make sure that we didn't, that before we rise, that we have that all the technical amendments that need to be made, or if there are things that aren't technical that have to be addressed, can be addressed. And maybe even at that point, as few amendments as they were, and I know that they've been working with them all along, we may even have an engrossed bill by that time to vote on. So I'm hoping that we can complete this at 3 o'clock. Okay? We stand in recess until 3.